Hey everyone, James Niggemeyer here. Thank you for tuning back into my YouTube channel. It has just been windy day after day. You might have a day where the wind kind of lays a little bit and then bam, it's back up to windy again lately here in East Texas. And I know a lot of guys are challenged by those conditions, those windy days. We've been having, 10 to 15, 15 to 20 with gusts to 25. There's a way to get out there and go fishing anyways. I think if we continue to wait for that perfect day or those days when the wind's not blowing, we can miss a lot of great fishing. So the best thing to do is just get out there and gut it out. And so I thought it'd be a great topic today to do a video on my top 5 favorite baits for windy conditions in the springtime. But before I get into it, if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you like the content, please give me a thumbs up and drop a comment down below. So here's my top 5 choices for fishing windy conditions in the springtime. We all know it can be pretty difficult to change our mindset that the wind is your friend. And I didn't coin that phrase. I think Kevin Van Dam is one of the most popular guys as saying that the wind is your friend. And it's true. We should view the wind as our friend because it makes the fish a little bit more aggressive. It makes them a little bit apt to leave the cover and come and take a bait. I think still calm days are some of the toughest days to catch fish. But with that being said, just really try to make sure that your mindset is that the wind is your friend. That'll help a bunch. But the wind can make things more challenging because it makes boat positioning more difficult and lure placement and accuracy more difficult, just casting in general. So that's why we kind of view fishing in the wind is maybe less than favorable type time to go fishing. So with that being said, here's my top 5 baits for fishing in the wind. I'm thankful that I'm behind this dock in a little protected pocket right here. And there's always some protected water somewhere on the lake, and so that's always something to keep in mind. But top 5 baits. In the springtime, there's so many fish that are coming shallow to spawn. And so a shallow running crankbait, something that's got a little shallow bill like this, that you can throw up in and around those spawning areas and just work it back through there in a stop and go or erratic fashion. And a bluegill pattern can be great because a bluegill is something that preys upon the bass's eggs, and if there's actually some fry around, they eat baby fry, and so the bass will get real protective about that. And a bluegill color can be really good, but a shad pattern can be really good, like a striking sexy shad pattern. And those shad patterns can be good, especially if you notice there's shad in the area. So keep that in mind. But bluegills and shad patterns, this is a striking 1.5 shallow. And another one that would be really good could be 2.5 wake bait. So that could be also good as far as crankbaits for shallow. That's going to be number 1, and this is not in order of importance. The way I would say the order of importance is, if the bass like it, then that's the number 1 bait for the day, and then so on and so forth. So number 1, I'm just choosing a crankbait because I think it's a great one to cover water with, and it's easier to cast and wind under windier conditions. So, and similarly, a spinnerbait. The spinnerbait can be also great for casting and winding in and around shallow pockets, docks, wood, laydowns, stumps, anything in the water that a bass might take cover in and around, whether it's pre-spawn, spawn, or post-spawn. Spinnerbait in the wind is probably the best time to throw a spinnerbait is under windy conditions. So spinnerbait is great. And again, I can chunk and wind it. I can throw it out there and reel it back in, and I can cover water with it. And because it's heavy, I can throw it around and make it more accurate in my presentation in my cast. I can fish it high in the water column, and I can slow roll it and let it go down. And I generally like a smaller frame spinnerbait. This is the Strike King Tour Grade spinnerbait. This is their 5/16 ounce. It's a little smaller one in and around the spawn. I feel like a little smaller one. If the water's dirtier, then I might go to a 3/8 or even 1/2 ounce with some bigger blades. But to start out, if I'm not sure they're going to eat it, I'm going to go with a smaller one first off in the springtime. You don't want to go bass fishing in the springtime, whether it's windy or if it's flat calm, without a bladed jig. Here's a Strike King Thunder Cricket in a bluegill pattern for the same reasons that I was choosing bluegill patterns for my my crankbaits. So definitely you want to throw a bladed jig. I've got a blade minnow on the back of this Thunder Cricket in this bluegill pattern, and I can throw it out and wind it around. It's got great vibration, and it's just a great bait year round. So fishing under windier conditions, I generally tend to go with more of an aggressive approach, something where I can, get a reaction strike, and I can utilize the fact that bass are more apt to leave cover to come get a bait, and their strike window, I think, gets more broad when you have windier conditions. And we actually even have clouds. So clouds and wind, it's really a good time to be able to get out and catch bass on moving type baits. So that's why I kind of lean towards more moving type baits. Plus they're easier to fish. Once you have wind, a lot of times you'll have bow in your line with bottom bouncing type baits like jigs and worms and stuff like that. So I generally lean towards, your more moving or horizontal moving type bait, cast and wind retrieve. That brings me into number 4, the swim jig. Again, in a kind of a bluegill or brim pattern. I really like a swim jig year round. I mean, it can be just a phenomenal bait whenever fish are in and around shallow cover, and a swim jig in the springtime is definitely one of my go-tos. So maybe a 3/8 or 1/4 ounce swim jig, and I've got it paired with a striking rage craw or a menace grub, and I can fish this in some of the same areas that I fish my spinnerbait. But sometimes they won't want those spinnerbait blades, so I'll go with the swim jig. And then there's just days where, even though it's windy, those fish just don't want to chase a moving type bait or a horizontal moving type of lure. And that's when I've got to go with a soft plastic bait. Of course, the challenging thing is, of course, in the wind, you get the bow in the line, it's harder to detect strikes, but you've just got to go with more of a vertical falling presentation or a soft plastic bait, where sometimes you can fish it in and around an area and just fish it slower, just because they do not want to react to more of a moving type, power type bait or cast and wind reeling type presentation. And that's when I go with a wacky rig or a Nico rig. And generally I would probably go to a wacky rig on those flatter or days when there's not as much wind. But on the windy days, I'm gonna go with a Nico rig. And a Nico rig is essentially a weighted wacky rig. I've actually put a nail weight inside here, and I've rigged it wacky style. And the weight actually helps me throw it. It takes some of the bow out of the line, and I can actually feel it as it's coming back, get a little bit more lure contact, or be able to keep in touch with my bait and see if a fish actually has it. So those are really my top 5 baits for fishing windy type conditions in the springtime. So when you're faced with windy conditions, the forecast says it's supposed to blow, don't let that deter you from getting out on the water and enjoying some of the springtime bass fishing. Get out there, tough it out, and make the most of it. Well, true to form, if you don't like the conditions in Texas, just wait 10 minutes, it'll change. But I was able to catch one on the old white swim jig, switched up, kind of ran it around this bank grass. But the conditions have changed, and it's dead slick calm and completely overcast, where you had some sun poking through before that. If you're out there faced with windy conditions in the springtime, make sure you try one of my top 5 favorite baits for windy conditions in the springtime. Thanks for tuning into my YouTube channel, and until next time, good fishing.